hopefully you can see my presentation now. So some background on my research before I begin. I'm predominantly a book historian, and one of the main things I work on is the network of people and institutions who were interested in Arabic in 16th and early 17th century England, and the books and manuscripts that flowed between them. I'm not a historian of medicine or Islamic knowledge and traditions, so this is going to be a talk about a handful of specific Arabic-related books and their owner, Lancelot Browne. The research I'm going to be sharing first emerged in 2019 when I was doing my master's degree, and I spent time in the Royal College of Physicians library with one of the manuscripts I'm going to show you. And it really developed, this research, when I started my PhD research during the pandemic, in huge part thanks to Katie Birkwood, who facilitated my digital viewing of the college's annotated copy of Avicenna's Canon of Medicine, which is the book that you have just seen in your tour. Not many researchers can say that they made exciting progress with their special collections research during lockdown, and for that I am very grateful. So here is that book as it's displayed in the current exhibition, A Body of Knowledge. It's a big folio volume, over 1,000 pages long, an Arabic version of Avicenna's Canon of Medicine that was printed in Rome in 1593. This copy is heavily annotated in Arabic, Latin, and Greek, and it's been in the college library since at least 1654, probably donated by William Harvey, the famous 17th century physician who was responsible for building a new library for the college at the time. Over the course of this talk, I'm going to give you a little background information about the text itself before moving on to the book's owner, Lancelot Browne, how he read it and his other Arabic books, and how the book survived the Great Fire of London to be in the library today. Along the way, I will touch on English contact with the Arabic-speaking world, the difficulties of learning Arabic in England at the time, and the value that was given to Arabic books in England. So this is how early modern Europeans might have imagined Avicenna. It's a woodcut depiction of him from the Nuremberg Chronicle, an illustrated encyclopedia of world history printed in the 1490s. He is shown as a physician inspecting a patient's urine. Avicenna is the name by which he was known in medieval and early modern Europe, a name which is still often used today, but it's a Latinized version of Ibn Sina. His full name was longer than this, but he was actually Abu Ali al-Hussein ibn Abdullah ibn Sina. He was a polymath from Central Asia who produced works on not only medicine, but also philosophy, theology, among other topics. His first language was Persian, but many of his works were composed in Arabic. And it's important to remember this because it will come up later in this talk. Arabic was the original language of the Canon of Medicine. He died in 1037, just over a decade after completing his Canon of Medicine, or Al-Qanun fi Tibb. The Canon is a comprehensive 5-book medical encyclopedia which covers general medical theory, diseases, pharmacology, and materia medica. In it, Avicenna consolidated the Islamic medical tradition linked to Galen and Hippocrates with Aristotle's natural philosophy and evidence from his own medical practice. It became a central text not just in the Islamic world, but also throughout Christian Europe. It was first translated into Latin in the 12th century in Spain by an Italian translator. From there, it became one of the, if not the, most important medical texts for centuries. I should say that this picture is the college's oldest Arabic manuscript of the Canon, and it will pop up again later in my talk. During the Renaissance, scholars realized that some errors had entered texts like the Canon of Medicine during their initial translation into Latin, and so some decided to learn Arabic so that they could access this knowledge in its original language. In 1593, the Medici press in Rome printed the Arabic text of the Canon for the first time. There had only been a handful of printing businesses throughout Europe that were capable of printing Arabic up to that point, and the Medici press was by far the most advanced. It had been established with the aim of selling printed books to the Islamic world, which was still a culture of manuscripts at this point. The first Arabic printing didn't happen there until much later. But it soon became clear that the books were much too expensive to produce and the market too unprofitable. Instead, they became sought after among early modern European bibliophiles who wanted rare, expensive works, and by scholars across Europe who were learning Arabic. Here is the book as you see it in the exhibition, open at the pages where Avicenna discusses the medical issues created by various spiders, and he describes the spiders as well as other creatures. And you can see that the book's reader, Lancelot Browne, is annotating the pages. He's adding words in the margins, underlining words and phrases, and he's striking some sections out. And he seems to have been genuinely interested in spiders. He extracts details from these pages into one of his surviving manuscripts. I keep referring to Lancelot Browne, but how do I know he annotated and owned this book, and who was he? To show you some of my workings, here is the first printed catalogue of the RCP library, produced in 1660. Under the K3 shelf mark, there are a number of works by Avicenna. At the bottom of that extracted list is one described as Avicenna in Arabic, produced in Rome with notes by Dr. Browne. So we know there was definitely a copy of this book annotated by a Dr. Browne in the library in 1660. And we know it was this book because happily it still has its shelf mark label pasted inside, K3. Here is an account of Dr. Browne published by a contemporary in 1602. Dr. Browne, one of the ordinary physicians to Her Majesty, whom I take to be so universally learned in all manner of good and liberal sciences, and besides his great learning, I know him to be very wise and honest. So Browne is a physician to the Queen, Elizabeth I. He's very learned, which can definitely help if you want to learn Arabic in this period. And according to this writer, he's very wise and honest. There's no surviving portrait of Browne, so I think it's quite nice to have a character description like this. And I think when no portrait survives, the next best thing is perhaps seeing somebody's handwriting. Here is Lancelot Browne writing his name, both in English and in Arabic. So we've established that he was a physician to the Queen, and we're getting a small idea of his character and his abilities, but what do we know about Lancelot Browne? So he was a physician to royalty and members of the court, treating their general medical conditions, and it's in this capacity that most of his appearances in the historical record occur. He pops up in letters and other documents, treating people and visiting people. We don't know exactly when he was born, but he came from York, and based on when he started university, he was probably born in the 1540s. In 1559, he enrolled at Cambridge, and he spent many years there, receiving his license to practice medicine from the university in 1576. It was at Cambridge that he seems to have been introduced informally to the Arabic language, and he also potentially played a role in teaching it to younger students. He was made a Fellow of the Royal College of Physicians in 1584 and played an active role in the administration of the college, censor from 1587, elect in 1599, and council from 1604 until his death. In the winter of 1604, his daughter Elizabeth married the rising star William Harvey, and around that time, Browne was petitioning people in high places in a bid to see Harvey replace one of the ailing physicians to the royal household. His bids to see Harvey's promotion ultimately failed, although I don't think it caused too much of a setback to Harvey's career. Browne died at some point in 1605, but all the parish records of his local church were lost in the Great Fire of 1666. And for this reason, biographical details about his life and his family tend to be quite scant. Here is his name in Arabic again. It's not a particularly elegant hand, but alongside his annotations, it shows that he did have knowledge of the language at a time when it was incredibly rare and challenging, an incredibly rare and challenging skill to have in England. But how proficient was he? To avoid casting judgment, I think it's helpful to know how his contemporaries viewed him. and a helpful account survives from around 1600 when a Moroccan ambassador and his delegation visited London. Here is the ambassador, Abd al-Wahid bin Masoud bin Muhammad bin Anoun. This portrait was painted to commemorate the visit, and today it's in the University of Birmingham Shakespeare Institute. The English had been trading in Morocco since at least the 1560s, and England's relationship with Morocco had been strengthened throughout Elizabeth's reign. The two nations had a common enemy in Spain. William Bedwell, the most celebrated English Arabist of the time, was among the party who spent time with the Moroccans, as was Lancelot Browne. The two men had been present while the Moroccans had spoken Arabic, and Bedwell later remembered how Master Browne, a most renowned physician, seemed to have understood it, Arabic, perfectly, not without the Moor's admiration and astonishment. For Bedwell, Browne's skill in Arabic was clear through how he understood the Moroccans when they spoke the language. So we've established that Browne annotated the book. He had Arabic knowledge and was admired by his peers. But how did he actually learn the language? Here is a modern assessment of the Arabic language learning landscape of England at the time. Not only was there no provision for teaching it at the universities, but even those who wished to study it privately faced formidable difficulties. Printed grammars were few and miserable, and there was no dictionary worth the name. Indeed, there were very few printed books in Arabic at all, and those that existed were hard to obtain in England. So there was no formal structure for learning the language, and the books that are crucial for the activity were hard to come by. What other evidence sheds light on how Browne tackled this challenge? There are a couple more clues in the 1660 RCP Library catalogue. Here is one of them, a specimen Arabic-Latin dictionary compiled by Lancelot Browne. In the mid-17th century, after Browne's death, this dictionary was used by Edmund Castell, who was creating a large polyglot dictionary, the Lexicon Heptaglotton. In its preface, he had cited the dictionary as a source, praising Browne as an unparalleled scholar of Avicenna. Alongside Bedwell's quote about the Moroccans, Castell's opinion is often cited as being key evidence of Browne's skill in Arabic. Modern scholarship of Arabic studies repeated these compliments, believing that the material evidence of Browne's Arabic learning had disappeared. His dictionary has frequently been described in recent decades as lost. But here it is in the Royal College of Physicians library. It's a really valuable document for shedding light on Browne's Arabic learning, and it also shows his collaboration with Bedwell. The core of this manuscript copies a specimen dictionary produced by Bedwell in the 1590s, and Browne has interleaved these smaller sheets with larger blank pages, making room for his vocabulary as it expanded with his reading of Avicenna. There's also another clue in the 1660 catalogue that sheds light on how this process worked. This entry lists a Latin edition of Avicenna's Canon, printed in Venice in 1564, which is also annotated by Lancelot Browne, Dr. Browne. It's no longer in the RCP library, but I have identified it in the British Library. Viewing these three items from Browne's library, his annotated Latin and Arabic editions of the Canon of Medicine and his manuscript dictionary, sheds light on how he read the books in parallel and consolidated his knowledge, both medical and linguistic, while entering vocabulary into his dictionary. Two of these items are still in the RCP library, and one has since made its way to the British Library. Other books of Browne's don't seem to appear in the 1660 catalogue, so his library was presumably dispersed more widely after his death. Here is a version of Euclid's Elements, annotated by Browne, in Marsh's library. I'm grateful to Sue Hemmons for sharing her work on this book with me, as well as these photographs. It is worth noting that Browne's annotations in this volume are not nearly as prolific as those in his Avicenna. Whether that reflects his Arabic abilities or his lack of interest in mathematics, I'm not sure. And so I've identified at least 2 Arabic printed books from Browne's personal library, and I hope that more might survive. The library of the Royal College of Physicians has been crucial to the survival of most of the books I've shown you so far. But as we heard earlier, most of the library was lost in the Great Fire of London. So what does that tell us about the library's collection of Arabic items? This quote comes from a description of how the college librarian, Christopher Merritt, attempted to save some of the library during the fire. All of the chiefest of the books and things of value in and about the said library and college were brought into the said college yard in readiness to preserve them. Several of the college books in a great heap were on fire. This quote paints a picture of the violence of the fire, the chaos of the scene, and the threat to the library, which would ultimately see most of its content destroyed. But some books were saved, and in a list of those volumes, we find a striking number of works in Arabic. There's an Arabic thesaurus, Euclid, not Browne's copy, Browne's dictionary, Browne's Latin Canon of Medicine, 2 copies of the Canon in Arabic, including Browne's, and a collection of Arabic script manuscripts that had been donated by John Selden, a later scholar of Arabic, in 1654. Here is one of them. I showed you a page from it earlier. It's the college's oldest manuscript of Avicenna's Canon, and it is dated to 1214 CE. This is not necessarily a useful item in its own right. The library had 2 copies of the printed edition, and this is only the first part of the work. But its presence in the library perhaps speaks to a desire to be connected to this important text and its origins. This manuscript and the others like it linked the Royal College of Physicians to the Islamic world, where some of their most prized knowledge had originated. The survival of this manuscript, along with Browne's books and the other Arabic items saved by the college librarian, show the value placed on Arabic books and knowledge in the early modern period. For Lancelot Browne, his books were a route to learning the language and to better understanding the texts that were key to his profession as a physician. And for the Royal College of Physicians and its librarian, they were objects of immense value, prioritised and sought out during a time of danger and destruction. Thank you.